Hello and welcome to another episode of This Much is True Crime with myself, Martin Frizzell, and Emeritus Professor of Criminology, David Wilson. Hello, David.
Good morning, Martin. How are you?
I suppose we could call this much is true politics as well, because the cases we're about to talk about are inextricably linked with American politics, it would seem. And I was calling it the M&M's case. So Maxwell and Menendez, just in the past 24 hours or so, big developments in these cases. If we take Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, first of all, serving many years in jail in America for sex trafficking. She's the only one from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal that seems to have been caught so far. And she gave last month quite a long interview over 2 days to America's Deputy Attorney General, talking about her role and also just what was behind the Epstein situation, where their client lists, for instance. And they've just released 300 pages of transcripts. What do you take from what she was saying?
Well, the first thing that I take from what she was saying is who she was saying this to. And you've mentioned that these conversations were with the Deputy Attorney General, a man called Todd Blanche. And we should note that prior to taking on that role for government, Todd Blanche was Donald Trump's personal attorney. So this is a man that's been appointed by Trump, having served Trump as his personal attorney, and now he's interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell. And surprise, surprise, what I take away from the 300 pages of transcript that have been released is, in effect, in terms of the American politics, she's saying nothing to see here. There is no Epstein client list. The ex-president Bill Clinton and current president Donald Trump behaved honorably in every situation. Indeed, I believe, Martin, she even called Donald Trump a gentleman. Did you come across that
I've
statement?
got the actual quote here, yes, from the transcripts. She said, "The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects." Now, cynical old me might think that, is that because she's going for a pardon? Because, of course, Trump has it in his power to grant that.
And you mentioned she was serving quite a lengthy sentence. She's serving 20 years as a result of being sex trafficking charges that were proven against her. And therefore, she would be she'd be a much older woman, and the chances of her surviving jail would have been slim. So therefore, she's seeking a pardon. And immediately as a result of speaking to the Deputy Attorney General, she gets moved from the prison that she was serving her sentence in Florida to a minimum security facility in the state of Texas. So there have already been advantages for her in terms of the kinds of things that she shared with Blanche. She also said, and this is more my side of the pod, isn't it? She also said that she didn't believe that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. She claimed that she didn't believe he'd been silenced by other who might have had it in their interest because they were on his so-called client list, because she, of course, says there is no Epstein client list, but she thinks that he was murdered, and seems to think he was murdered by somebody who, perhaps an inmate, perhaps somebody in the Bureau of Prisons. But as far as she's concerned, Epstein didn't commit suicide.
No, she was suggesting that it's the prison system itself is falling apart there, and it may well have led, whether it's a prison officer, whether it's an inmate for $20, $30 could have done it. He was a celebrity, of course, in jail. And of course, it harks back to a previous episode we did where we looked at the conspiracy theories of people saying, why would someone want to kill Epstein in jail? And also at the time, remember, I said to you, is she herself a possible target now in the jail where she is because of the stuff that she may know? And going through or listening to a lot of the 300 pages of transcripts, I mean, she's basically saying, I know nothing, no, it doesn't seem anything I don't know why she's in jail then. If quite frankly, listening to the transcripts, it seems everyone was very pleasant, very nice. No, there was no conspiracy, none of those kind of things. And also, just since she's spoken and the transcripts have been released, Virginia Giuffre, who was the young woman, of course,
Yep.
who alleged Prince Andrew had sex with her and who sadly took her own life earlier this year, her family are furious at this. They're
Yeah.
saying that Maxwell's been given a platform to rewrite history.
Absolutely true. That's exactly what Virginia Giuffre's family have said today in the press. And note also, we've been talking about the American aspects to this case because both you and I are interested in those in particular. But as far as the photograph, the infamous photograph of Prince Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell herself in that photograph, it's always been presumed that Epstein may have taken the photograph. She says it's a complete fake. So there's not only nothing to see as far as Ghislaine Maxwell is concerned about the American politics, she's actually saying there's nothing to see about the royal family either, even though we must remember Prince Andrew settled out of court with Virginia Giuffre for a considerable amount of money.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall at Balmoral as we speak, which is where the King and the Queen have decamped for their annual summer holidays. And this year, it's quite a gathering because a lot of them have been invited, including Prince Andrew, who went up there a few days ago, and he's most likely to be joined by Sarah Ferguson and their daughters. And just talking of Sarah Ferguson, this is the case where it's quite amazing that Maxwell came out and she spent quite a long time talking about the Sarah Ferguson Prince Andrew connection in the 300 pages of transcript. She used a phrase that she thought that Sarah Ferguson was, and I quote, putting the moves on Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means. Does that mean that she fancied him? She was trying to have a relationship with him. She was trying to, use him as an investor of some kind. But certainly, she was the one who introduced Andrew to Epstein and not Maxwell. Maxwell said that the two men had nothing in common, really. Why would I introduce them? But it was Sarah Ferguson who did all the running on this. And if it does get any sort of pickup in any particular way, it's just the kind of thing at Balmoral, the King, who thought maybe things are dying down a bit. This then pops up again. But Sarah Ferguson has now been brought into this more than she had been before.
And I saw that I think it was the BBC that reached out to Sarah Ferguson to see if she wanted to make any comment in relation to what Ghislaine Maxwell had stated, and that she did not. She did not make any comment in return to that BBC approach, and I think that would be the right thing to do, wouldn't it? Just to draw a veil over what Ghislaine Maxwell is saying, but what effectively we've got here are denial of there being any conspiracy, about there being an Epstein client list, and he may have been murdered to keep him silenced. Clinton's got a clean bill of health. Trump's got a clean bill of health. And Prince Andrew's got a clean bill of health. And the only person that really comes out of this as having potentially something to worry about would be Sarah Ferguson. So, you used the phrase, are you being too cynical about what she said? I don't think you are. And I think if I was Virginia Giuffre's family, I would be as incensed as they seem to be about Maxwell rewriting what in fact has happened only in the past few years.
And I don't think it's likely to dampen down any of the white hot heat of those who think there's conspiracy all over this story. I don't think it, and they will still think there's more details, there's more files, there's more to come out.
Well, you can never dampen down a conspiracy theory. It seems to me that no matter what one does in terms of showing the information to be false or showing alternative information to be true, if you believe in a conspiracy, you tend to believe until forever and a day. But Martin, is this true? I kind of have at the back of my mind, did not Ghislaine Maxwell come into a studio. Was it this morning when you were editor because she wanted to be a TV presenter? Is that true?
No, that was Sarah Ferguson.
Oh, what? See, there's
It
a
was the
nice.
Duchess of York came in, and yeah, we had a good time. Listen, I've met her a few times, and speak as you find. I always found her a very nice lady, but clearly, she's a businesswoman because she has to make money for her family, and she's got a foundation. But I found her incredibly generous, I have to say. I mean, she came in not just with presents for me and executive type level, but she came in with presents for everyone, for the producers, for the APs, for the runners. And she was so sweet and lovely. But yeah, but listen, she's written books, she's got some merchandise, and she needs to make money. So I'm not surprised at all that, should she come across someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who's loaded with it, he could be a possible investor. I mean, let's leave it at that. Let's not go any further.
I
Um,
don't want to. I mean, I would have loved it if I had got this correct and it was Ghislaine Maxwell that had come in to the studio. But how was Sarah Ferguson as a TV presenter?
she's got work to do. Shall we put it at that? She was on with Alison and Dermot, and they kind of did most of the heavy lifting. She's got work to do. But again, as I said, speak as you find. I mean, she was very delightful to all of us. Um, but, good luck to her, whatever she's doing. But sadly, I think she's been drawn more into this Maxwell scandal and Epstein saga. Let's talk about the other part of the M&Ms, so the Menendez brothers,
Yep.
who, again, just in the past day or so, have been up before parole boards in California from their cells in San Diego. Now, this, of course, has come to probably most people's attention through the documentaries and certainly Netflix last year, the Monsters miniseries that shocked so many people who hadn't heard of the Menendez story. The upshot is, though, they're still in jail. They're not getting out.
So this is a story that goes back for 36 years. Kitty and Jose Menendez, Lyle and Eric's parents, were murdered in August 1989. And right from the get-go, and in fact, even as we're discussing this now, there have always been two competing analyses of the brothers who are eventually, after a hung jury, going to get tried of murdering, get convicted of murdering their parents in 1996 and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. So I'll come on to why they were now assessed for parole last week. But there have always been two competing narratives. The two competing narratives have been that their parents were murdered because Eric and Lyle in particular, when their parents died, Lyle was 21, Eric was 18, that they were basically gold diggers. They were cold-blooded killers who just wanted their parents' fortune. So that's the prosecution's narrative about them, whereas in fact their defense has been that both of them, but in particular Eric, had been sexually abused by his father, Jose, who was a music executive, and that sexual abuse led them to believe that they were in fear for their own life, and that as a way of processing their trauma and their fear, they kill the parents. It's always been confusing, therefore, because there's, why kill their mother? Why kill Kitty if the object of their anger and trauma was their father? So why kill her too? But effectively, it's a story that has still got those two narratives attached to it. The reason that they have been assessed for parole is because in the wake of what you were saying in 2024, the Netflix documentary garnered quite a few high-profile supporters. Kim Kardashian springs to mind. In the wake of the Netflix drama Monster, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story, the Ryan Murphy drama, which the Menendez brothers did not like, and the Menendez family did not like. But in the wake of that kind of 2024 buzz about the Menendez brothers, the then LA District Attorney, remember that's an elected post in the United States, a man called George Gascoigne, said that he would be in favor of the brothers being resentenced, which they were in May 2025, May this year. And as a result of that resentencing, their sentence was originally life without the possibility of parole. Their resentencing gave them 50 years to life with the possibility of parole. And because they had committed their crimes before they were age 26, they were immediately eligible for parole. And both of them have had that opportunity last week, and both of them were denied.
And they've become a cult. I'm not going to say heroes by any stretch of the imagination, but a cult couple in the sense that there's so much invested in this from the media, from podcasters, from people who are, absolute sort of devotees to this kind of thing. And when you actually think back to what they did, I mean, it was so brutal, the killing of their parents with shotguns. The police thought it was a hit mob job. It was such a dreadful scene that they uncovered. And the interesting thing, David, that I found was that the parole panel, I just thought they were going to look at, how have these two been behaving in jail? But they also spent quite a bit of time going back into the original offense itself.
Well, that's for a number of the reason for that is that they have to show that they're not a risk should they be released back into the community. And so in assessing the risk, the parole panel would look at any previous offences that they had committed. And indeed, prior to shooting their parents, they had committed a series of burglaries. And then after they had killed their parents, remember, it was Lyle in particular that dropped the various suggestions to the LAPD that in fact that the mafia had been involved, that there had been some mob hits on the parents, but in particular, so they originally the brothers weren't regarded as suspects. And it wasn't for several months until 1990, I think March 1990, that they were actually arrested and charged with these murders. So the reason why they go back into the particular case is that the brothers went on a spending spree in the immediate aftermath of their parents' murders, which made them really kind of callous. How could they behave in this way, given the savagery of how Kitty and Jose, no matter what's alleged about Jose, the savagery with which their parents had been murdered. And there was that specific thing that I raised. If Jose had been sexually abusing both Lyle and in particular Eric, why do they shoot their mother? And that's why I think the board spent some time trying to talk to them about, what actually went on here, and why shoot your mother if it was your father that was actually abusing you.
Because they were suggesting, or their defense was, that she was complicit, or that she didn't stop. She knew what was going on and she went along with it, didn't take part in it, but didn't stop it.
But that's exactly what they have explained in terms of why they shot their mother. But if you actually look at the various reports from the time and subsequently about the crime scene itself, it was quite clear that I think it was 12 shots that they fired at their mother and 6 at their father.
Well, they went back out. There was Eric went back out and reloaded and came back in.
So you see, this isn't a spur of the moment. It's not, he's lost all sense. He could have stopped. He goes back in after reloading. His mother was still alive at that point. So there are some crime-specific things that needed to be discussed. And I think it was Robert Barton in Eric's trial. Robert Barton was the prison
parole commissioner.
The parole commissioner, thank you. And Robert Barton said, look, 2 things can be true, because what's interesting is that most of the Menendez family are very supportive of the brothers being given parole, but and usually when you're talking about parole, it's the family of the victim that's opposing parole. And so Robert Barton was saying two things can be true. Your family can support you in wanting you to be released, but it can also be true that you might still pose a risk to the public if you are released. And that's why there was so much emphasis both on the original crime and then on their institutional behavior.
The parole board came out and said the reason certainly Lyle had his eligibility, shall we say, for parole turned down was because they still think that he struggles with deception, rule breaking, and entitlement, which I thought was an interesting one for those two, and also the misuse of a cell phone. Not allowed cell phones. They think they're just as bad as drugs in jail, but apparently for quite some time he'd been using a cell phone. He said to keep in touch with his family. Eric, his younger brother, again the parole board said that he'd been involved in fights with drug use, and he was even involved in a tax fraud with one of the gangs in jail. He said he did that just to survive, basically. And again, misuse of a cell phone. Excuse me. Both of them said that they used the cell phone because they thought at the time, a year or so ago, that they weren't ever going to get out of jail until this new thing happened. And obviously they're deeply remorseful, which the parole board accepted, but that they are still a threat to society. Just one thing, just on the sexual abuse they're alleging that they went through at the hands of their father. This was 1989. Now, we know the world has moved on. We know different things and understanding about the effect that has on children, young people especially. Do you think if that was now and they'd gone to court with the sexual abuse defense, that the outcome would have been different?
Yes, I do. I really do. I think that and we also, quite apart from a better understanding of intrafamilial sexual abuse today than there would have been in the 1980s, I think we also better understand PTSD, because I do feel from the abuse, particularly of Eric, there was quite clearly PTSD in relation to how he reacted to what had happened with to his father. I think if they were being retried today, those issues, their sentencing would have been very different to what happened in the 1980s. You've got to remember this became a cause célèbre very quickly. Because it was covered by court TV. It was also incredibly newsworthy because often, and you and I have spoken about this on the pod before, often we discuss crime from committed street crimes committed by organized crime groups. Here were two really rich, in Beverly Hills, two really rich, attractive young men committing crime, killing their parents. So this was a huge newsworthy glimpse into an aspirational lifestyle and what happened when the curtains got drawn. So right from the start, this has been something that's engaged the public's attention. And of course, most people want to know the why. And the why has either always been because they're cold-blooded killers and they just wanted the money, and they did go on shopping sprees immediately after their parents were murdered. They bought cars, they bought clothes. I think Lyle even bought shares in a restaurant in Princeton. So it's either been, are they cold-blooded killers, or in fact, is there some trauma in their background that led to them making these things? One of the counterbalances to what you were saying that amused me, I have to say, I would be amused by this kind of detail, wouldn't I? That I didn't realize that both of them had now undertaken degrees in sociology whilst they'd been in prison. And I kept thinking, I wonder if they've read any criminology whilst they've been in jail as well. But yes, both now have degrees in criminology, and Lyle's doing a master's in sociology.
And that was part of their plea to get parole, but it didn't work. This kind of model prisoner thing just didn't wash. I wonder if also the parole board, the people who were sitting on that panel, thought as well, just of the fallout, the media fallout, if they were allowed to go for parole. So they've been told...
I think that's important, Martin, You were probably going to mention this yourself, so forgive me for speaking over you. But I think that's the important dimension that we shouldn't ignore here, because we were talking about Ghislaine Maxwell and the politics of America, because there are politics involved in this story too, aren't there?
Well, yes, because there's two ways now they can go. The parole hearing is now, put aside for up to another 3 years. So there's talk that, they could be brought forward, but it's a good year or two away before they can have another crack at it. But there are two other ways that their cases could end, and end sooner. One is habeas corpus, which is bringing new evidence, and there is some new evidence around that talks about just the awfulness of the sexual abuse that they went under from independent from other witnesses. So that has still been considered. So that's a possibility. And I think what you might be alluding to now is that there could be a pardon from the Democratic governor of California.
Yeah, absolutely right. I wouldn't rate their chances of getting the habeas corpus retrial off the ground at all. Because remember, the LA County DA is an elected appointment. The person who seemed to be favorable to the Menendez brothers in 2024, George Gascoigne, lost the office, didn't get re-elected, and it's somebody called Robert Hochman, if memory serves me correctly, who won that office in the last election, and he seems to be pretty negative in relation to the brothers getting another go at the trial. But of course, the evidence that they're claiming that's new is that about the abuse, the sexual abuse, and the fact that a member of a boy band came forward to say that he had also been sexually abused by Jose Menendez. So that's the habeas corpus side. But the bigger political element to it is that it could be that Gavin Newsom, who's he's a rising star. He's one of the stars of the Democratic firmament politically. And Gavin Newsom is quite clearly going to make a bid for the nomination of the Democratic Party to stand as their presidential candidate. And Newsom, therefore, has this opportunity to really, if he offers clemency, will he be seen as soft on crime? And that seems like a very British approach to this. But remember, Trump has sent in the National Guard to Los Angeles, a multicultural city. And Trump sent in the National Guard to say that effectively Newsom can't run criminal justice. Newsom can't control the streets of Los Angeles. And so this idea of how he might react to the Menendez brothers has indeed an element that might come back to haunt him if he is seen as being too liberal.
It's, again, we speak about several times. It feels like now the American dream gone wrong, doesn't it? This kind of sort of Cuban family who've done very well. And Jose, the father, was very big at RCA Records. He's involved in the signing of Duran Duran. The house they live in Beverly Hills, frequented in the past by Michael Jackson, Elton John. And so there's all this glamour, and hadn't they done well, and then it explodes into this modern day kind of Greek tragedy. It's quite fascinating, and you can see why people are fascinated by it. And just to come back to finally just one of the points we were mentioning, how quite topsy-turvy this is. It's the family themselves, more than a dozen relatives, who are pushing for the brothers to be released. They're saying they're disappointed, but not discouraged.
Yeah, well, firstly, the family were really logical about their understanding of the parole process. California, it's very difficult to get parole in California. I mean, under 1 in 5 people will be granted parole, and this was their first attempt to get parole. And quite clearly, the family seemed quite logical about this might not work on this occasion. And I think, again, it was Robert Barton who said that the parole commissioner, who said, to Eric Menendez, you can either have a pity party or you can really focus on some of the negative things that we've said about what you have to put right to show that you're not a risk. But yeah, their cousin Anna Maria has been really, Anna Maria Menendez has been really vocal on social media about the brothers need to come out. Remember also, just looping back slightly, if you go back to the Ryan Murphy Monsters drama on Netflix, the Menendez family hated that. They absolutely hated that drama because it presented Lyle in particular as being a hothead, somebody who wouldn't listen to reason, who would, fly off the handle at the drop of a hat. And so they don't like that image of Lyle because, of course, that still makes him risky in terms of would he be safe to put back into the community. So
But,
again,
but the thing
we'll
is that,
probably...
but what I'm talking is whether it's risky or not. The point is that in one case or in a couple of cases, it's brothers and sisters of the Menendez parents. Knowing that their brother or sister had their brains blown out by these two entitled young men, and I get it's many years have passed, but to be the prime supporters now, for me, it sounds like reverse logic.
Well, unless you believe, which I tend to, that Eric was in fact being repeatedly, consistently sexually abused by Jose. I don't think there's any doubt that he was the victim of intrafamilial sexual abuse by his father. And and we now know so much more about that phenomenon. And I do think that that suggests that there should be sympathy towards him. We should have empathy for him. It doesn't mean to say we should ignore Jose and Kitty Menendez, but it does mean that would alter one's view about what Eric did. And I actually suggested, Martin, it wouldn't have surprised me if Eric had got parole and Lyle didn't. Lyle was the older brother and seemed to have taken the lead in what happened on the night in August 1989 when Kitty and Jose were murdered. And so it wouldn't have surprised me if Eric got parole, but Lyle didn't. But I think, I'm not so sure that they can separate these two personalities out now.
And I do wonder if the family were well aware or aware at all of, at the time of the abuse that the brothers were going under. Did anyone put their hands up or their heads above the parapet and say, hang on, what's this? Or report them?
There were no reports, and it also counted against both Eric and Lyle, who also claimed to have been sexually abused. It also counted against them that when they reached the age of 18, and Eric was 18, Lyle was 21, that they hadn't reported that abuse to anyone. They hadn't raised that. But sometimes, the kids who are being abused find it very difficult to articulate what is happening to them.
And also, as we said, in the modern world, although 89 was modern, but this is the modern world, the present day, I think it would be very different. There's so many channels for whether it's youngsters or family or people who just think they know something to put their hands up. And I think that it would have been picked up now, you'd like to think.
Oh, I hope so. And although, sexual abuse is such a widespread phenomenon, and there is still silences and shame attached for the victim. There's still silences and shame attached to what has happened to them or is happening to them. But which is why I've always been much more sympathetic to Eric Menendez. I always felt that there was something there that should attract our empathy for what had been happening to him, which seemed to be consistent. It wasn't as if he'd been abused once. It seemed to be a regular occurrence in his life, which he ultimately shares with a counsellor. Eric and Lyle were in counselling. And of course, the counsellor, the psychodynamic counsellor, plays a very odd role within bringing the brothers to court, doesn't he?
Yeah, client-doctor relationship, but it was the tapes of going through therapy where the brothers were encouraged by him to blurt out their guilt. That did it for them, wasn't it? With the counselor's confused relationship with his girlfriend, she then sort of made it possible for those tapes to come out. But yeah, the counselor. So it's a strange but fascinating kind of web, this whole story. Do you think, just finally, Professor, that the next parole hearing might be the one that gets them out?
Yeah, I do. I felt that Eric was. If you read what's being said about them by the parole board panels, and they had different parole board panels, but if you read what was being said about them by those parole board panels, Eric seems very, very close, I think, to being able to demonstrate that he would be suitable for parole. I'm less convinced yet by Lyle and Lyle's chances, but I'm not so sure that you can release one but not the other. But I think the next parole hearing will be something that will have a different outcome. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So that's M&M's, Maxwell, and the Menendez, and in both cases, still around. Probably more to talk about at some point with these two.
Well, I'll enjoy doing that at the appropriate time. I mean, we've got so much material from the United States, and I still think we've got to be discussing something at some stage, Martin, about Amanda Knox and the new Disney series.
I think that might well be for the next one, actually. Yes. So in maybe a week's time or so, Amanda Knox, of course, just to let everybody know, was involved in, of course, of the dreadful murder of Meredith, the British student in Italy, a few years ago.
Kircher, yeah.
Always claimed her innocence, and now there is Disney-backed miniseries out, pretty much authored by her and produced by Monica Lewinsky.
See, you can't escape sometimes these kind of vaguely political elements in the American stories that we cover. There's always some connection to politics, isn't there, at the highest level? And of course, you're using Monica Lewinsky, and that brings us back to Bill Clinton and Bill Clinton's time. So it goes round and round and round.
Let's leave it at that. Let's not get into any more trouble. Professor, thank you for the time being. Until the next time.
Take care, Martin.